Hello, and thanks for joining us for a Christian Viewpoint. We have with us today Jerrod Sessler, who most of you who watch our programs know ran for 4th Congressional District last time in 2022, and running again this time. So, Jerrod, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very thankful to have you here. I think I'll start off with asking, why did you get in the race in 2020, and why again this time?
Let's start with 2012, when Obama was reelected. That was probably the decision point for me when I decided that I wanted to run for this office. But at the time, I just didn't, my kids were little, and I just didn't feel like things were right. I also had a lot to learn just as in terms of civics and politics and all that kind of stuff. But I knew that this is where God was calling me, and we needed to have people with integrity, people with experience that had good heads on their shoulders to help run our country, because there's just so much corruption and just negativity within our political system. And so that's kind of what drove it. But then more specifically, when we got to 2020, you know, I was in D.C. on January 6th, and I saw what happened there. Most of what we've been told about that day was a complete lie. And to see our representative vote to impeach the best president of our lives, you know, in terms of production and the results that President Trump produced for this country, it was immeasurable in the modern day. And
so had you been holding off running because you would have been running against a Republican?
Correct. Yeah, I actually had talked to our representative and said, hey, when you're ready to retire, you know, I'll come in, I'll work with you for a year, shadow you, you know, earn your endorsement, you know, those kinds of things. But that all changed
when he voted.
Yeah, when he voted to impeach Trump. And then I started looking at his past record, and I started then from then till now, just kind of the things that he has voted for. And I realized, wow, one of the most conservative districts in the country, you know, doesn't have a conservative representative, and that's a big problem. And so, as you know, we went through the last election, midterms. We had 8 candidates in the race, and it made it very difficult. It allowed, you know, our current representative to squeak through the primary with, you know, around 25% of the vote.
Yeah, because he's going to have his base vote, and you guys just kind of split the rest.
Well, and he's got the name recognition. He's got congressional money. You know, if you look at the postcards that you get in the mail, it says paid for by U.S. Congress. So our tax dollars are going to him so that he can send postcards and market himself. He started a radio show before that. You know, he used his position in order to earn those votes. He got less votes by percentage than Liz Cheney did in Wyoming, but because there were so many candidates in the race, we weren't able to knock him out of the primary. He went to the general with the Democrat, and of course he ended up winning another 2 years. Well, now here we are. We're only about 9 months from the next primary, and I'm the only candidate running against him. And, you know, we have a very good shot of beating him this time. You know, what I really need is I need people to coalesce around my campaign, because I won't have the access to, you know, tax dollars to be able to market myself and do free radio shows and, you know, and send out postcards and do all these kinds of things. But we can stand up together as a community and say no to a representative who simply doesn't represent our values.
Besides that, I know there's some other issues, so let's talk about some other issues that you and Dan Newhouse are. You know, on
so we can talk. Yeah, we can talk specifically on a bunch of those issues. But one of the things that I want to say in regards to that is, I think it's very important for the most conservative district in Washington State and one of the most conservative districts in the country to have a representative who's very vocal. And whether you agree with everything they say or not, you know, friends of mine like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan and Andy Biggs and Bob Good, they are all very vocal, prominent conservatives across the country who are willing to share their voice.
We need so many more of those.
Yeah, we just don't have that. Now imagine what would happen in Washington State if we had that kind of a voice in Washington State. That would really inspire conservatives across Washington State. You know, if you look at Dan Newhouse's voting record, we've sent about $1.6 billion to Planned Parenthood over the last 4 years that he voted for. My son tells me that's about $1.5 million per day that we're sending to Planned Parenthood. And we know exactly what they're doing. And the truth is,
and he's voted for that several times.
He has voted for that many times. And there are things that Planned Parenthood does that are useful, and you and I would agree with that. But the majority of what they do is the human trafficking they're doing through, the organs and killing babies and all this kind of stuff that we totally disagree with. Yep. So that's a big issue. He's voted for red flag laws to take away our rights, to our Second Amendment rights. He supported the January 6th Commission, which is a complete one-sided sham. It's just a joke. It was an embarrassment, honestly, of Congress to even host that commission. Every single spending bill that comes across his desk, he votes for it. He just doesn't represent us as a conservative people. And so that's what we deserve to have as a conservative district here in Central Washington. We deserve to have someone that will represent us that way.
And right after Roe v. Wade was finally overturned by our Supreme Court, he quickly joined the left in voting to codify homosexual marriage.
Exactly.
And that didn't come out much either in the media.
No, unfortunately it doesn't, and they don't cover those kinds of things. It's unfortunate. There are local, media outlets around the district that do talk about that stuff, but there's certainly no mass media that is going to condemn those kinds of choices. And they're happy to have someone who has the seniority that he has to go ahead and call themselves a Republican, but join the left in most of his votes.
Yeah. And, you talked about Liz Cheney. And you think about that January 6th commission, it had Liz Cheney, and then it had that Adam Kinzinger, who are just left-wing liberals. And, one of them saw the writing on the wall, Kinzinger, and decided not to run again. And Cheney had the biggest loss in the primary in history of the United States for an incumbent. So that was a big message sent. Unfortunately, we re-elected Dan Newhouse here. He was, only two? There was only 2 of the 10 in the House that voted to
impeach Trump.
How do you go about beating the establishment? Because the establishment is going to be supporting him.
Right.
The swamp, I call him. They vote because of the R, and he's an incumbent. He could vote for all the garbage going on in our public schools. He could vote for everything that's evil in our society, and because he's an incumbent with an R, they're going to support him. And they're going to give money to him. So how do you overcome that?
Well, let me tell you a little story about when I was younger, for starters. And it proves a point that you will not find a more tenacious person than me.
Okay.
I'm also an engineer, so I'm very, very methodical. I think through things, plan them out. But when I was younger, I bought a jet ski, one of the old style ones that you had to stand up on. Do you ever ride one of those?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and do you remember when you first rode them?
I don't stand up on them.
And you first tried to stand up on them, how difficult it was?
I don't remember ever trying.
So it took me the better part of a summer.
Okay.
And I'm not physically or sports. I'm not inept, right? I used to drive race cars.
Yeah.
And it took me most of a summer just to be able to comfortably be able to stand up on one of those things. Okay. Many trips of putting that thing on the trailer and taking it out and backing that thing in and getting on it and struggling. And it wasn't even a new one; it was a used one. So it was didn't have all the extra features or whatever. But my point is, I never gave up.
Yeah.
And I eventually got to the point where I could stand up on it, and then came along all the sit-down Sea-Doos and all that kind of stuff, because they knew the other ones were just too hard to ride and they couldn't sell as many of them. So the number one thing is tenacity. When you talk to anyone who is involved in politics or watched the last campaign, they know that I was by far miles ahead of any of the other candidates in terms of my activity, terms of my investment, in terms of what I was doing, how I was going about it, running a professional
campaign. You worked harder than any of them.
Worked very hard. I was always there, always up at 4:30 every single day, working hard, doing everything I could. We're in a very good spot. If you look at it, 2/3 of the Republican voters voted against Dan Newhouse in the last election. And so the votes are there. The question is can we reach all those voters and let them know that Jerrod Sessler is running for Congress? He's a better choice than Dan Newhouse. He's a conservative. He'll represent us in a vocal way and earn those votes from those people. And I believe we can do that, because I'm going to be just as active, and I already am just as active or more active than I was last time, but we don't have the issue of all the other candidates, stripping away a few votes here and a few votes there. Exactly. I don't particularly like any of the negative nature of campaigning. I'll tell you, and I actually told my wife this recently. I said, part of the reason why we don't have good people in politics is because of the election process. It is one of the most brutal things I've ever been through in my life.
It has been.
It's very, very difficult. Yeah, and reading history, you know, I just finished some books on Lyndon Baines Johnson and some of his things that he did throughout his political career, and I'm even more convinced that this is just a messy space. But I am here, and I believe this is where God's called me. I have the brains, I have the intelligence, I have the understanding of what our civic process is supposed to look like.
Correct.
And I believe that I have a really, really good chance of winning this time.
And you can stand up on a jet ski now.
Exactly.
And I bet Dan Newhouse can't do that.
Yeah, probably not.
So I'd like to, to talk about some issues that I think are important to me and most of our viewers that as a congressman you will be voting on. And one is the border. I mean, for many years, my wife and I were convinced that abortion was the most important because I can't imagine losing God's blessing faster than murdering his unborn in the womb.
Exactly.
And that still is a major issue. And now in the LGBTQ, RST, 1, 2, 3, XYZ plus junk, which I say they don't need to have that many letters, just use P. P covers everything. That was pervert, because all of them are perverted. All those letters stand for something.
I like that.
So just call it P. It covers everything. But Jerrod, it seems now, because we know the reason all that stuff is legal, the reason we're murdering babies in America, the reason the stuff's going on in our public schools that it is, it's because of the political system. I mean, unfortunately, we Christians who have checked out and pastors, and you've heard me go on before about pastors. I really believe we've lost this war in the pulpits of America because pastors became milquetoast. And I've said on this program many times that I think 5% of the pastors should be in the pulpits, and about 95% of the pastors in the pulpits today in America should be out, because they're not men, they're mice. Because they don't want to call sin sin, because they're worried about nickels and numbers.
And it's unfortunate because last time we did an interview, or maybe one of the other times we did an interview, you mentioned that, and I probably wouldn't have as firmly agreed with you. Now I do. Well, absolutely.
Good.
It's amazing.
I've been working with pastors for 35 years, so I know. All that is all because of politics and who we elect and who votes on those things. So we need to be involved. And the border issue right now, because they're coming over, and we know the left wants them to come over, because we know 85% of them that do end up voting are going to vote Democrat. So, and then by voting Democrat, those people keep making the laws that have done everything I talked about. So to me now, I think getting this border under control, which Trump was doing, God bless his efforts with everybody, all the left and the media. What are you going to do there? Are you going to be a Marjorie Taylor Greene on the border? Matt Gaetz and the guys you mentioned? How important is the border to you?
I commit to and promise to be as vocal as anyone else in Congress, possibly even more. And I'm not going to
You would vote to fund the border.
Absolutely. Fund securing the border. The thing is that people don't realize that up to and about 150 different nationalities are coming across the border every single month. And so we've got entire prison systems that are being emptied in central Washington, and they're just shipping those people up to the border. Now, are there some good people coming across the border in terms of hardworking, labor, whatever? Yeah, of course there is.
But they still need to come legally.
They need to come through a legal process and use that. My concern and my question is, what's to stop foreign entities from right now and over the last couple of years of essentially sending and building up their own army, so to speak, inside of our land? And once those people come across the border, how do you control the violence and the crime that they are going to ensue on the American people? My heart goes out. Years ago, I'm sure you remember this, there was a stray bullet, I think, of an illegal who killed a beautiful young lady in San Francisco on the wharf.
I can't remember her name.
I don't remember her name either, but that one always comes to mind. There was another girl in Texas who was out for a jog, and her body was found in a field.
And Jerrod, for every one of those that we know of,
we don't know. And the thing is, my point with that is, those crimes are walking across the border today.
Right.
And once they get across the border and they're free to move about the country, we really don't have any means to control that or to stop or to prevent any of those crimes from happening until after they happen.
That's right.
And to me, that's totally unacceptable. You cannot, there is no example in history of a country that runs without a secure border. I mean, do you go to sleep at night without locking your front door?
Of course
it's no different than that. You have to have that security. And so I feel very strongly about that.
Ours is the weakest border of anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Ours is the weakest. The laws on the books, if we enforced them, are strong laws. But we don't.
Yeah.
That's why we need a wall.
And, you know, I've been to the border a couple times. I think you and I have talked about this in the past. We also have a problem at our northern border. It's very similar to the southern border. People don't realize that, but it's there. The Border Patrol is completely overrun. And when I talk to them, when I talk to officials,
to do that.
Yeah, when Trump was in office, it was very calm. You know, it was totally manageable, totally doable. As soon as the illegitimate president that we have now gets into office, it just was like mayhem at the border. Not even a measurable difference.
And the spirit, the left, the Biden administration has killed the spirit of those men and women trying to protect our borders.
And they're doing their best, you know. And what's amazing about it is, you know, a lot of these illegals die coming across the border, and they die on private land, and those landowners are responsible for you know, taking care of that. There's private volunteer citizens that go out in their Jeeps and different things to pick up dead bodies. There's nobody from the government that's taking care of that. The idea that we don't have more attention on that, even from many conservatives in Congress right now, is astounding to me. So the other thing I'll commit to do is be much more open in terms of my communication. I've developed actually a completely different process for staffing. You know, congressmen are limited on the number of staff that they can have when they're in Congress. So I have actually sort of a lay leadership plan where I'll be developing a group of people within the district to be my hands and feet here in the district, so that people actually get, you know, they call him Do Nothing Dan for a reason, because when you call his office, you don't get anything. In email, you get a form response. You don't actually get any meaningful response. And so I'll have a team of people that will care for the people within our district. Now we have, you know, almost 800,000 people in the district, but we can still work together to make sure that people get the answers they need and they get the support that they need, you know, inside the district. So, you know, that's one thing that I'll commit to do. And I think that's one of the things that makes me unique is I've done enough in life, you know, ran businesses, built businesses from the ground up, nationwide, raised a family, been married for almost 30 years. I've done enough that I've been through those seasons in my life where somebody said, well, Jerrod, you can't do it that way. And I'm like, why not? Why do we need to follow the standard practice? Maybe that doesn't work.
Did Trump?
Maybe it doesn't work. Exactly. And so with me as a representative, you're going to see a lot of new approaches to things. And the whole point is going to be, look, voting is very easy in Congress. It's not going to take very much time. It's what I do with my responsibility outside of that. How do I manage and lead my staff, and what do we do in terms of fighting for America from that position of authority and responsibility that the people of this district give me? To me, that's what people should really be asking. The votes are easy. You know, P is before S. Pelosi votes before Sessler. And so I know how to vote. I can walk in late and just see how Pelosi voted and just do the opposite every time.
You wouldn't even know.
It'd be fine.
Yeah, you don't even know what they're talking about.
Exactly. You know, and the other thing is, you know, I talk to constituents as I'm going around the district. I give them my cell phone. You want my cell phone? You want to be able to text me? No problem. You know, why not?
Yeah.
You know, the reality is most people aren't going to use it anyways, but at least giving them that access and allowing them to be able to do it. You remember when Speaker McCarthy was up in January, and we had the 20 conservative representatives that they stood their ground, and what a lot of people don't realize is they got a lot of rules changed in the House, you know, and they changed it from, you know, being the people's house back to being the people's house instead of, you know, a corporate paymasters and all this kind of stuff. I was texting several of the congressmen in Congress that week because they're all practically bored, right? Because they're in there waiting, they're doing these votes over and over again, and so I'm texting them and telling them what's going on here and how's the media is covering it, and they're sending me stuff back. And so I think it's important for me to have, you know, really key relationships within the district, people who have their their thumbs on the pulse of what's going on here.
Sure, yep.
I think it's important for people to be involved with their county parties, for me to be integrated and involved with county party chairs, and the entire county parties, all the PCOs and representatives that we have in those different positions. And that's where people can get involved too. They can go and get involved in whatever county you're in, get involved with the Republican Party.
Yep. All these indictments now that are coming down against Trump, they cannot allow him to be reelected, because if they thought he was tough last time, when he doesn't have a second term behind him, and Trump does, to his credit, he doesn't necessarily forgive and forget.
Yeah.
He will clean the swamp this time.
Yeah.
He will go after and they all know it. So I think it's twofold. I think they're scared to death if he gets reelected again, the swamp's going to get cleaned. But I also think, Jerrod, that it is sending a message. It's trying to make all the rest of us scared. You come to a peaceful protest on January 6th. Look what happened. Some of these guys are getting 5 years and 6 years and 8 years. So, in your opinion, if you go, get elected, or let's just say you were there right now, what would you be doing as a congressman with all these indictments of our past president? What do you think? I mean, are the Republicans doing enough to defend him?
Yeah, definitely not. First of all, the whole thing is distraction. They want people to be distracted. All the false flags that came out from the November election in 2020 until the January 6th, confirmation of the election, and even the January 20th inauguration, it was all distraction, and it was all driven by the left.
Yep.
Most of QAnon is driven by the left because they want people to be distracted. They want their hope on next Tuesday and next Thursday instead of on the big picture. So most of what's going on with Trump right now, you look at Ken Paxton and what's happening to him in Texas, it's all a distraction. It's all a bunch of lies. It's hogwash. Let me just tell you, this is history repeating itself. Okay. So if you go back to our founding documents, our Constitution, the original the 10 amendments came from the Bill of Rights. And those Bill of Rights are quite interesting. So first 10 amendments, very interesting to read them. If the viewers haven't read those, please go read them. But half of them, at least half, possibly 6 out of 10, deal at least directly or indirectly with prisoners. And so you kind of have to sit back and ask yourself, why would our framers be so concerned about the treatment of prisoners unless they were not guilty, but they were turned into prisoners and they were turned into criminals because of a tyrannical government? And that's exactly what England was doing at the time, and that's exactly what we see happening right now with an illegitimate president, with a Merrick Garland as the head of the DOJ who has an axe to grind because he didn't get into the Supreme Court when Obama referred him to the Senate. McConnell blocked that. He never got his Supreme Court pick. Now he's the DOJ. He's fighting against Trump, who got the 3 picks in the Supreme Court that he felt like he should be one of. Today we're seeing that same tyranny that they saw back then, that they rebelled against the strongest country in probably the history of the world, and we won, and God walked us through that.
Is he still blessing America when have murdered maybe 100 million babies now? When we are letting the LGBT community run our public schools, when we have let God be kicked out and welcomed the trans stuff in? Our military is performing homosexual marriages on their bases. We've eliminated God from just about everything. Is he still blessing this country, or are we like in Jeremiah, when God told Jeremiah, even if Moses and Samuel were to appear with you right now, you're wasting your time because I've had it with this people. Are we there?
Well, let me answer it this way. I think when you look at what's going on in America today and really throughout the world, I think that there is absolute evidence of evil. And I think that's important because in America, we kind of live soft lives, right? We haven't really been faced with a lot of the things that the rest of the world.
With the time in which we
I was in the military. I traveled the world. I've seen a lot of things that people haven't seen. Today, when you look at what's going on in America, I think that it is, I don't know how else you describe someone coming out and, for example, saying that there's more than 2 genders, or that men can have babies, or that men should be competing in women's sports, or things like that.
And they can't describe what a woman is.
Yeah, and they somehow still get confirmed to the Supreme Court. So my sense is that evil is real. You look at the Bible, and if you look in Luke 10, Jesus gave the 72 and his disciples, he gave them the power and authority to be able to go and heal people and to cast out demons. And the cast out demon part, as Americans, we're kind of like, yeah, that was back then. Well, my contention is they didn't get them all. And we've got to deal with that. And here's the encouraging part of it. Yeah, but we kind of lived. It's just like the churches you talk about, right? We've lived this rather soft existence, right? And it's pervasive in the churches. You got these seeker-sensitive churches that really don't dive into a lot of the issues. And
that's right.
you look at people like Jack Hibbs and Mark Driscoll, and thank God for them, right? They're just amazing. Yeah. And John Hagee's another one. Here's the encouraging part from that. The existence of evil in such an obvious way, to me, is an encouraging fact that should really give us encouragement in our faith, because we realize, oh, our God really exists. Jesus absolutely did pay the price for us. He has given us a promise. I don't know how that plays out in our country, but I know how it plays out personally. And for me, I've given my life to Jesus. I serve him every single day. I think our purpose and our mission and our passion for everything, and I know this is true for you, is to serve God, knowing that however much difficulty we face in these days, the end, if you look Philippians 1:21, we have a promise that is secure in eternity. And so what I've done in response to that is we've created a prayer group. And we have a local guy who's been praying for this valley for 40 years. He grew up here, and people can join that prayer group on Facebook. Just do a search on Jerrod Sessler prayer group, and they can join that, because I think it's powerful. I think God has given us the power and authority to overcome this evil on an individual basis and for our region. And I think that the truth is that's true for our country. Now, whether or not we can develop a mass enough to oppose that, that's in our hands. God's given us the power and authority to do it. The question is, will we?
Yeah. 1 minute to go. There's our viewership, and maybe wondering, I've never heard of this guy before. I think one thing is you have better name recognition this time. Every time we drive to the Lower Valley, we still see trucks out there with your big things on the sides of the truck, so that's smart. Yeah. Why should they vote for you over Dan Newhouse?
Yeah, well, I would just say that our current representative has had, I think, 5 or 6 terms to prove his worth. I think when you look at the record, you look at the ACU, they have a scoring system. The truth is that our current representative just doesn't have the voting record that supports representing a conservative district, and I will. I am a family man. I'm an engineer. I'm a former NASCAR driver. My wife and I have been married for 27 years. We homeschooled 3 kids. They're amazing, great, awesome kids. I think beforehand you were talking to my wife about some of the work that our youngest does, traveling the country, going to campuses and abortion clinics, praying, and they call them baby saves, trying to save lives. It's pretty amazing. So I think your option to support me and to get involved with my campaign and to help me be our next representative here is an opportunity to truly send one of us. We have a beautiful farm down in Prosser, and which is between Tri-Cities and Yakima, and we're very passionate about this country, about serving God, and bringing our natural rights that come from God back into the forefront. We are blessed as a nation to have a constitution that has codified our rights, but really those rights came from God first.
That's right. Amen.
And so if you want someone and you want to get behind someone and support someone that will stand up for those, then Jerrod Sessler is the way to vote. And I appreciate your help, your support, your donations, your referrals from friends. Invite me to your place. I'll come and spend some time with you and your family and your friends for a couple hours some evening and give you an opportunity to get to know me. You
got my vote, you have my wife's vote, and you have my endorsement. Anybody who watches our programs, this is the guy to vote for. Thanks for coming in. Thank you for watching A Christian Viewpoint.